So now we are going to be moving on from the breakout sessions. We've chosen 4 representatives. For those of you who are wondering who they are, again, you want to just introduce yourselves, or you want me to introduce you? Well, go ahead. Jakob?
Yeah, I'm Jacob. I ran the session on the networked organization.
And I'm Martin. I moderated the session on open business.
I'm Will, and we did the meaning organization.
I'm Esk, and we did the session on open innovation and co-creation.
And so what we have this panel up here is to share some of their findings, some great examples, some of the barriers, and maybe I'll throw in a little surprise. We'll just see. We'll see how that goes. So if we just take you in order, Jacob, please tell us about some of the findings.
Yeah, I think some of the findings were primarily barriers, which were also what I asked for. I asked people what are holding you back from just having a networked organization, and we discussed some pretty radical examples and then tried to go from there into reality. And I think what we faced was some pretty low practical barriers, is that we have a staff mainly in big corporate structures that is not necessarily used to being on Facebook, Twitter all the time. They're not used to these network tools. So maybe we need a way of immigrating them. A lot of my groups talked about immigrating them into this digital sphere. And then another part of this was discussing that we need new structures, new tools, new kinds of leaders maybe even, to run these kinds of organizations. So I think it was barriers that we focused on a lot. And then when we came to solutions, it was pretty different what we looked at and what examples we looked at. Everything from Steve Jobs, which could look extremely controlled and not networked, but I think we rephrased him into being a network leader, into kindergarten teachers and so on. That was pretty broad.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Could you just can you elaborate a little bit? You went from Steve Jobs to the kindergarten teacher?
Yeah, just to say that we went from big corporate CEOs to like people that you knew when you grew up as network leaders. And I think we also rephrased it a bit from being like a network organization to being a network-based organization.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We're just going to go through and Martin, share with us some of your findings.
Yeah, we had 2 interesting discussions about open business models. And I think one of the first things we tried to agree on was what we actually meant by open. We defined open in this context as not open as in transparent, but open as in terms on which you share information. You share information that you have rights over with other people, and you use information that other people have the right and have given you the right to use. Open information, open data, open content, open source code in that sense. I think we also discussed a lot of the barriers or the hindrances to realizing open business models. And 2 of the things that we focused on as challenges was, first of all, to change the mindsets of organizations, because we all know that as kids we are raised by the concept. I mean, our parents tells us to share candy and things, not with old people, but with the brothers and sisters and other kids in kindergarten and so on. But then suddenly we enter into organizations, and the credo there is keep things shut, closed, get paid, never give something unless they have gotten permission first. So that was the first challenge, how to sort of challenge that mindset. The other challenge was how do we actually, I mean, one thing is to change the mindset, but we have to find ways to actually make money from opening up, and how to identify those business models. And I think I had especially, I think, 2 very good insights from the participants in my group with respect to these 2 challenges. And the first was that a good way to change the mindset to a more open attitude in a company would be not to talk about openness at all, but to sort of revisit your strategy, figure out what are you actually good at, what is the purpose of your organization. And that should open up for a lot of discussions as to all those things that are not part of your core business. Why don't we open that up? Why don't we share that with other people and so on? So taking a strategic view and then having that as a way of opening up for a discussion of open business models. I think I would say, some would say a very typical attitude from a lawyer's point of view. I got a very good insight when we discussed business models. Somebody said that a very good idea that you could seek to pursue by opening up data, for instance, would be to damage other people's business. If you opened up data in an area of published content that you knew would hurt other people's business, then that might be a very good reason in itself for actually spreading things out, because you know that would cannibalize somebody else's business. I mean, it might be tending to the evil, but on the other hand, it's very much in tune with the concept of open competition. Yeah.
All right. Interesting. I won't dig into that right now. We'll just move right on to Will.
Yep. So barriers-wise, really obvious ones to why particularly Danish organizations might not go on this journey towards becoming meaning organizations was fear and anxiety, totally understandable. Old school business plans, the need to still make profit, to hit old school measures, which might actually be very valid still. The really interesting one for me as a kind of outsider and tourist was this Danish concept of Yandel, someone or other.
Yandel.
And the kind of otherwise a different group expressed it as the kind of Danish comfort zone, like we can talk about how to change the world and then we'll go home, put the fire on and have a glass of wine. And there seemed to be this kind of, chasm around will we actually do it? Which was particularly interesting for me, having sat there and been enormously inspired by Klaus from Noma and thinking, Danes can rock the world, and then hearing a load of people saying, oh, well, maybe we can't. And then also a very tangible and real and understandable fear and question mark, which I think is absolutely valid about, can you do this with an existing large organization? Heard a lot of voices saying, a lot of these companies are run by visionary CEOs, whether it's Anita Roddick in the Body Shop, or it's Steve Jobs, or whoever, or Klaus. But I really believe we can. And I think we need to work as a community to find those examples. There's HCL, which is a big Indian IT business. I know they've done a turnaround based on these kind of principles, but we need to find more to develop our own confidence that you can be done. Some awesome kind of insights. How do you measure meaning? Really set off the kind of intellectual characteristic that we seem to have in this group. So some really interesting conversations about how do you measure meaning. And then a brilliant suggestion by one woman, which is you don't need to measure meaning. Just ask people at the end of the day, was your work meaningful? And if they say it was, then it was. That's really good kind of hack. How do you get belief from the people? And then conversely, how do you get senior management to buy into this? Totally, understandable concerns. How do you marry the purpose of many people? That sounds like a really interesting challenge. And we talked about how Zappos pay people to leave after the induction. So I think perhaps in the next sort of 10, 15 years, we're going to see more of these filtering mechanics for getting people out as much as getting people in. Amazing concept stroke new buzzword of the day, meaning chains. So if you've got value chains, how does meaning filter down through a supply chain and build and grow? And I think at first you could say, oh, that's a load of kind of buzzword bullshit. But then when you think about what Klaus was saying about terroir and the territory and the unique Nordicness that we have in cuisine, and if you think about the journey that some of that food goes on before it goes on a plate, then in a way that is a meaning chain. I think that's pretty cool. Lastly, very quickly, some examples of organizations. Groundfuss came up. Yeah. How do you say that? Came up a lot. They came up a lot. Unilever Ashanti project. Danish Rocket Guys. They came up. And Specialists.
Specialisten?
Yeah, they were.
Specialist.
Yeah, they were cool. They were a recurrent theme. And then last few things where the guy from Roskilde's point about, let's just do it. and less meetings, more doing, which seemed to resonate, and also celebrating Danish pioneers. So there was a sense that maybe we can overcome the chasm about can we do it by just finding more people to go, well, they're doing it, so maybe we can. And that was it. It was really good, though. Very smart people.
All right.
Thank you. Did that sound like it was a surprise?
It was very good. Okay, Ask, I'm going to go over to you because we're going to be, we have a time issue, so as you know.
Okay.
Sorry, Ask.
It's okay. It's okay. We discussed open innovation and co-creation, and I think the starting point was that open innovation and crowdsourcing and so forth is very good for like small, minor, incremental innovation steps, like doing things smarter. But when it comes to like the big picture of doing the smart things, it's a little bit harder. And when you look at the examples, there's very few companies who's able to make these kind of partnerships, working with co-creation in solving the big problems. And for rebuilding organizations for the next 1,000 years, we need to do the smart things smarter. And that's a tough challenge. And what we talk about is that really good innovation is not so much about coming up with good ideas, but it's more about understanding the problems and the challenges, and to see them from like new perspectives. And when you are within a big organization, you need somebody from the outside to help you understand what the problem really is. But getting this help, to have other people like play around in your dirty laundry, it takes trust. So the big challenge is for large organizations to build trust in their relationships, to be able to get the help that they need. So that was like one of the key elements that our discussions resonated around. And some of the conclusions was that it takes leadership. And I guess that several of the participants were like, okay, for the next session, we're going to visit rebuilding leadership because that's a key barrier to work with. And then also we talked about it's very important that you have somebody at the head of the organization who have the guts to set a target and also to admit sometimes when you need help. So we need to bring in a Steve Jobs or somebody else sometimes for setting that agenda. But just good discussions and also some good examples and I think you should give a big hand for Jakob because he was mentioned as one of the good examples in one of the groups.
Yeah, he was mentioned in ours a few times as well, actually.
Yay! Yay, Jakob. Well, that was just a short kind of overview of 4 of the sessions, which I couldn't have actually planned it any better, because I think as some of the things you mentioned kind of connects all the other things, and at least to my mind, and that to create better meaning, you need to have more better, concrete, open business models that are better networked. So how was that for wrapping a bow around it?